Isaiah chapter 14, verse 1 reads, because Yahweh has compassion on Jacob, and shall again choose Israel, and give them rest in their own land. So, um, remember that as we see in the book of Exodus, the people of Israel, when they got out of Egypt, they started worshiping the golden calf, and then the book of Amos tells us that the people of Israel worshiped Moloch and Kium throughout the 40 years that they were in the desert. And as we know, when the people entered the land, eventually they started worshiping the same false Elohim as those of Canaan. So sadly, the whole time, entire history, there has been apostasy. Even though Yahweh has been trying to reach his people, um, the people of Yahweh normally go away from him towards the false Elohim. Um, they're attracted by what these entities do, say, and etc. Right? Their doctrines, their spirits, how they make them feel, or whatever. So, um, when the people of Israel came out, Yahweh chose our people as his bride. And that was the Torah. The Torah was the covenant of marriage. And that was going to be broken. That's why we have a representation of that with the fact that Moshe came down and he saw that they were worshiping the golden calf, representing adultery. And then he broke the tablets. So that was prophecy of what we see later on in the book of YishaYahu, where Yahweh um, divorces his people. So he decided to have a divorce. He actually decided it from the very beginning in the desert as well. But Moshe convinced him not to destroy his people and to take them all the way to the land. So we see in Yirmiyahu as well, in the book of Jeremiah, that Yahweh promises to make a new covenant. What does that mean? That he got a divorce, but he was going to remarry. And we see that with Moshe's father. It is said in uh, several books that he divorced his wife because he thought it was the best. When Pharaoh in Egypt was killing all the children, he thought it was best not to be with his wife, not to procreate, in order to not have to kill any baby, any child. However, um, his daughter, Miriam, convinced him of getting back together, because he was stopping souls from entering the world, so they couldn't enter the next world either. However, those that died had the opportunity to continue. Plus, Pharaoh was only killing male children, while Amram, with his decision, he was stopping females also from coming into the world. So Miriam convinced him, and he got back with Yochebed, his wife, and then they had Moshe, which is the redeemer of the moment, right? So we see that also with at least tradition, that talks about Yishai, David's father, and it says that he also divorced because he thought that he wasn't allowed to be with a Israelite because he was a descendant of Ruth, who was a Gentile. So he had that wrong interpretation. So he divorced her, but then he had um, sex with his wife, thinking it was his slave, right? His or, well, yeah, turning her into a concubine. However, she went and told her um, um, well, mistress, her um, in this case, well, it is because the scripture doesn't mention her name, but David's mother, right? So she basically talked to the slave and took her place, just like Leah took Rachel's place when she married Jacob. So that's how David was conceived, and then he got back with his wife when he realized he could, and he, for a moment, and his other children thought that David was conceived with another man, but then they realized that it was Yishai's son when he was chosen as the king. So there are other, actually, the main or the first, no doubt, story that is similar to that I'm just mentioning regarding prophetical, the prophetical of how Yahweh would marry and then divorce his people, but then remarry. We see that with Adam, because Adam had Cain and Abel. Cain killed Abel, and then he separated or divorced his wife Eve for 130 years because he thought that it was pointless to bring children into the world if they were going to kill each other. So he divorced his wife for 130 years until the time of Lemech, when his wives wanted to divorce Lemech, and they went to Adam for advice, and Adam advised them to stay with him. And they said, well, then why don't you follow your own advice and go back to Chava, right, to Eve? So he was like, you're right. So he did. And that's when he had Set, right, which is the line from which Mashiach would come. So, same idea of separating and getting together for a blessing to come that would not have come if that unity would not, uh, if it would not have happened, right? So, once again, all of that, and I just mentioned a few of the stories that we actually see in the scriptures, ones from tradition and others that are actually in the scriptures, to show that just like Paul spoke about how marriage is a mystery, and the mystery of it, the sought interpretation of it, which is what mystery means, is that the Almighty would marry his people, that the Messiah would marry his congregation, that heaven would marry earth, and there would be unity of that eternal reality in this um, temporal reality. I was actually thinking about this a few days ago, of because a long time ago, Yahweh gave me an amazing revelation of. I'm not saying I was sent to the third heaven. I'm not saying that, but I had a moment in which I don't know. It was like I felt or understood what it would be to be there in the mental or psychological way. I don't know, which is pretty much the point, because that heaven, the third heaven, is just conscious, right? Is invisible, and that's mainly what I was able to understand. And the fact that everything is one, there's no right nor left, so there is no answer nor question, because it's all one, and therefore there is no yes or no. uh, is all one. So Yahweh created this reality for contrast to exist, and for many things to be able to happen in order to create, well, feelings of excitement, of happiness, of a bunch of other things that they also needed a contrast, and that's why there is sadness and pain and a bunch of other things, right? But um, as we've discussed that subject a lot regarding why this world was created, why there is pain and all of that, and we know, and we've come to the conclusion with scriptures that obviously it was needed. We needed to experience this reality in which there is pain in order to appreciate correctly and choose what is good. Oh, nobody's seeing. Oh, my bad. I thought I did it. Since I'm seeing my face on TikTok. Oh, sorry. I've been talking for a long time. All right. So, the good thing is that it's just I haven't read not even one verse. So, uh, let me try and remember. So yeah, this reality was created for us to be able to see the contrast and choose, because it's the world of free will. He gave us free will in order to choose him, in order to choose his will instead of our own. And those who choose their own create their own illusion, uh, their world, which eventually will disappear because it was only part of this reality, which is temporal. So, taking it a little bit further, that marriage from with of heaven and earth um, is because, as I was saying, that the third heaven in which Yahweh, or which Yahweh is one. He is one, and there is nothing but him. So that's why he decided to make make something else, a creation, and then he created humanity so that he could send souls into this reality to experience it, and then reunite with those souls and make another reality, a new one in which heaven and earth are one. And that is basically the point I got to a couple days ago, and for some reason we got there today, uh, of how, I repeat, the eternal doesn't change. That's why Yahweh doesn't change. But the temporal changes constantly. That is actually the main um, characteristic of the temporal reality, that it changes. But all those changes are also in a cycle that repeats. So, um, well, that's for another subject. So my point is, eternal heaven changes, earth doesn't change. So Yahweh will create a reality in which there will be a type of time for a certain change to happen, but only for the good. Because as we know, hope is eternal. So we will always hope for better things, even though we will already be in the best that we could have ever experienced ever. So after this world, there will be a much better world, but that world will continue to grow, and we will continue to grow in revelation, in understanding, in love, in happiness, joy, um, etc. Because there will always be new things, which is something that only happens in this reality, um, forever, which is something that only exists in that reality, heaven. So Yahweh will unite both, and that is the point and the representation of marriage. So going back to it, Moshe went for the tablets. He came down. He saw the golden calf. He broke them. Then 40 days later, he went up, came down with the tablets, new tablets, to show that there will be two covenants, to show that there will be two manifestations. So Yahushua came to renew the covenant, which was made in the desert. So Yahushua was Yahweh offering the people to remarry. And through that process, he was going from the flesh, which was only a representation, a shadow, to the spirit, which is the reality. And that's why Yahushua is the last Adam. The first Adam was to give a shadow, a representation. Then came the true Adam, which is Yahushua HaMashiach. So when he came to renew the covenant. But if we look from a higher perspective, then we would understand what I just said, that the first covenant was just a shadow. And that's why Paul speaks that it was old, and anything that is old will cease to exist, eventually will pass away, because that's what time does. So it's pretty much saying that the covenant in the desert was of the Levites, which are the priesthood of the flesh, which is a shadow, like letter. But the spirit, which came through Yahushua from the order of Melchizedek, is the eternal priesthood. So, with Yahushua came the true covenant. If we actually look from a higher perspective, the old covenant was a representation. The new covenant is actually the true covenant. And that is why, if we move this to the side, the book of Daniel says that the last has to appear to confirm the covenant. What covenant? The one that Yahushua made. Why? Because there was an apostasy the past 2,000 years. They rejected Mashiach. And then even those who claim to accept it, to accept him, well, I'm not talking about the disciples. I'm talking about 100 years, 200 years later, they started to deviate from the truth and to false doctrines and pagan religions, mainly because of the Roman Empire and their influence in the Catholic religion, which started to mess everything in the worst possible ways. So Yahushua is the true covenant, but there was an apostasy. Just like when when Moshe came down with the tablets, there was a golden calf. So he had to go back up and then come down. So the last is the second manifestation to confirm that first covenant that Yahushua made, like Moshe came down to confirm the first tablets that Elohim had made. And I hope that's being understood. And I know it's a big introduction by just reading a couple words from the first verse, but now you'll see why I said all of that. Because Yahweh has compassion on Jacob and shall again choose Israel. Again, choose Israel. So it is pretty much saying that he wants to remarry the people of Israel, even though he had divorced them. And that is why also Paul speaks about how those who were blinded in the time of Mashiach and they didn't accept him, were also prophesied to be blinded so that he would be rejected, and therefore he would, through his death, open a door for the nations, for the Gentiles. So all the true Yahudim eventually will accept Messiah. The true Yahudim will eventually, in this end times, accept the Messiah. So, because Yahweh has compassion on Jacob and shall again choose Israel and give them rest in their own land, and the strangers shall join them. Now, many people believe that this has already fulfilled, or most of it, since 1948, and the foundation of the state of Israel. However, the key word here is rest. And there has been no rest in that land, only war and danger and fear and a bunch of other things related to their fear of war because of the conflict with Muslims. And well, mainly because of the Zionist movement, right? Which started mainly started the lies and the mess and the destruction and all of that. So I'm talking about the political movement, of course, right? So because Yahweh has compassion on Jacob and shall again choose Israel and give them rest in their own land. So the ones that have entered the land of Israel, most of them are not truly descendants of Israel. There may be some of them in there somewhere, but most of them are not descendants of Israel. And secondly, there's no rest. There has been no rest in that land. So that's still to come, this verse. Give them rest in their own land, and strangers shall join them. That is referring to how Yahushua would open for the Gentiles, for the nations. That would be like saying, and foreigners shall join them. And they shall cling to the house of Jacob. So they will accept the mighty one of Jacob, which is Yahweh. And peoples shall take them and bring them to their own place. And the house of Israel shall possess them for servants and female servants in the land of Yahweh. I don't know if you guys have heard, but in the Talmud, which is the what they call the oral Torah, and it's pretty much their interpretation, and not even there is Baal's interpretation, because they also call it Torah Shebaal Peh, which means the Torah according to the mouth of Baal. So it is the interpretation of Baal. of the Torah. And it has a bunch of different interpretations that many times go against each other, and a bunch of other things that should not be written in any book. And for instance, and this is not the worst at all by far, but part of the things that they claim and believe, and it is based on verses like this, which are obviously they are taking it out of context, and they are even, well, they're not even Israelites in the true sense of the word, in any sense, not even flesh nor spirit. So that is why they get to those conclusions, and that's why they teach it, and that's what they love, because um because by their fruits you shall know them, right? So it says here, and people shall take them and bring them to their own place, and the house of Israel shall possess them for servants and female servants in the land of Yahweh. So in the Talmud it says that, let me see if it's 1800 or 2000, more, how many slaves there will be for each Jew in the Messianic era, according to the Talmud. Yeah, 2,800. So yeah, 2,800, 2,800 Gentile slaves. It is what they believe, that when the Messiah would appear, each of them would have 2,800. So 2,800. And they based it on Zechariah 8. But also on verses like this. However, let me see Zechariah. Oh, Zechariah 8:20-23 says, "Thus said Yahweh of hosts, it shall yet come to pass that there shall come people and the inhabitants of many cities, and the inhabitants of one city shall go to another, saying, Let us go speedily to pray before Yahweh, and to seek Yahweh of hosts. I will go also. Yeah, many people in strong nations shall come to seek Yahweh of hosts in Jerusalem, and to pray before Yahweh. Thus said Yahweh of hosts, in those days it shall come to pass that 10 men shall take the whole out of all languages of the nations, even shall take hold of the skirt of him that is a Yahudi, saying, We will go with you, for we have heard that Yahweh is with you." All right, so it says 10. It doesn't say 2,800, right? And it doesn't say even slaves. It says something else that refers to the spirit or the mantle that there will be on each of the chosen few. The many will be connected to the few, and then the nations to the many, in a similar way to what we see here. Um, in fact, like what we were reading on Isaiah is more connected to that thing than this. But um, also I don't know if you have seen the Hebrew Israelites, which also take verses like that to tell everybody that they're going to be their slaves when they go around. Well, not everybody, but everybody that they think is not Israel. Um, Pretty much calling them their future slaves. So obviously, those are not behaviors that should come from the spirit of Yahweh, the Ruach HaKodesh. That's not the reason why those verses are written, for us to act like that. No. So by their fruits you shall know them, right? So in the book of Revelation, chapter 2:9 and chapter 3:9, let me just read the 3:9, says, "See, I am giving up those of the congregation of Satan, who say they are Jews, who say they are Yehudim, and are not, but lie. See, I am making them come and worship before your feet, and to know that I have loved you." So, yeah, there will be slaves, and pretty much it will be the best part of those who have claimed that they will have slaves. So, those people that act like that could end up being the ones having to serve in the other reality. And obviously, being in the other reality, serving will be a great reward to exist in the other reality that Yahweh has prepared. So also remember that Yahweh told us that if we are going to rule, we need to serve. So from the head down, everyone serves. We serve Yahweh, and therefore we serve each other, right? But my point with all of this is that those who have the attitude or wanting to make everybody their slaves most likely will end up being enslaved in the other reality if they are even able to enter it. So I hope that's understood. And Yahweh is talking here in Revelation about those who claim to be the Israelites and are not. They will end up, some of them, having to recognize who are the true Israelites and worship before them. So going back to Isaiah. And peoples shall take them and bring them to their own place, and the house of Israel shall possess them for servants and female servants in the land of Yahweh. And they shall make captives of their captors. That's right. And they shall make captives of their captors, and rule over their oppressors. So everything is going to turn upside down because they did it already back in the day, calling good evil and evil good. So Yahweh has to turn it back around. And therefore, those who have ruled will be serving, and vice versa. And it shall be in the day Yahweh gives you rest from your sorrow and from your trouble and the hard service in which you were made to serve, right? Like in the, like referencing, of course, the slavery in Egypt or any of the pain during the exiles, or obviously to each person, any of the trials to which each of us has um, gone through. And it shall be in the day Yahweh gives you rest from your sorrow and from your trouble and the hard service in which you were made to serve, that you shall take up this proverb against the sovereign of Babel, right? Because they were going in exile to Babylon. In fact, remember that they are hoping to sacrifice the red heifer on August 3rd. And interestingly enough, that is the day in which the Babylonian Empire entered Jerusalem and destroyed the temple. Um, so that's pretty much what we are reading here in the prophet YishaYahu. That you shall take up this proverb against the sovereign of Babel. Remember that the sovereign of Babel was Nebuchadnezzar, right? But, well, Nebu is a false Elohim, Mercury, thought for the Egyptians, Mercury for the Romans, and other names depending on the culture. Um, so that relates to him as the false Messiah, the messenger of the gods. And Babel means confusion, remember? And also remember that the first leader in Babel, the first to found Babel, was Nimrod. And Nimrod is the main representation of the beast of Revelation 13. So also the fact that Babel means confusion, then we can understand this as that you shall take up this proverb against the sovereign of confusion. That is Satan, the one who makes sure everybody follows and worships something that is not true, and therefore him. That you shall take up this proverb against the sovereign of Babel and say, how the oppressor has ceased, the gold gatherer ceased. Remember that Nebuchadnezzar had a dream in which he saw a statue in the book of Daniel, chapter 2. And in that statue, the head of it represented his kingdom, Babel, and it was made of gold. So here we see how the oppressor has ceased, the gold gatherer ceased. So obviously they had a lot of gold, and also meant how huge and important and amazing was the empire of Babel compared to those that would come after, that would be of lower quality, lower value, but more destructive and evil. So in this case, we see the connection of Babel with gold, the king of Babel with gold. And remember that in the same book of Isaiah, it is Isaiah the prophet who tells us that Israel stopped worshiping Yahweh and ended up worshiping God, literally God, which is what the Hebrew word says, God. And as you guys know, that is the Hebrew name of the Elohim of fortune. So that is why Satan is in charge of fortune, both luck, and that's why LUC from Lucifer, but also fortune as in money. And that's why he offered everything in the world to Yahushua to tempt him. But Yahushua rejected him. However, those who have worshipped Satan, who have given their souls to Satan to serve him in this reality, they have received the riches of the world for a time. So Satan is the gatherer of gold because, well, he is the one in charge of the money in this reality, because money is also just a shadow, just like he is, of the true reality. And also, in fact, what I was saying regarding Nebuchadnezzar, um, so let me show it this way for those who are watching the screen on YouTube. If you are on TikTok and you would like to see what I'm showing on the screen, you could go to YouTube and look for the channel called The Way of Yahweh, just like this channel on TikTok. So Nebo, which is the beginning of the name of the king of Babel at that time, is a false mighty one. Here, obviously, there's a bunch of brands that use that name, thinking that they're gonna receive power for using the name of a god. Obviously, false Elohim. So here they put it. You see, Nebo, also known as Nabu, as in Nebuchadnezzar, right? Prominent Babylonian and Assyrian false Elohim, right? So associated with wisdom, writing, and scribes. And he is also the same entity. You see here, it says it is associated with the classical planet Mercury. So Nabu is Mercury. In Hebrew is Nebo, which is connected to Nabi, which is prophet. And Nabu, Mercury, is the, as they say in those religions, the god, the messenger of the gods. As you guys know, the true word that they erroneously translate as gods is Elohim. So it would be the messenger of Elohim. And as we know, Yahushua came as the son of Yahweh and his messenger, but Yahushua in Revelation 22:16 says that he's sending his messenger. So John said, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with Elohim, and the Word was Elohim. Elohim is a plural word because Yahushua was with the Father. The two of them are Elohim. So when the last comes as the messenger of the Son, then he is obviously the messenger of the Son and the Father, because he actually represents the Father on earth, as we know. So by Yahushua being at the right hand of the Father, there are two powers, and that is the mantle that is on the last as the throne of the Father and the Lamb. And when the last comes, he comes as the messenger of Elohim, of the Father and the Word, for he is the voice. And that is the title and the all the characteristics that they would give to this entity, Mercury. And if we look at Mercury, the way they draw him, you see right here, this is his symbol. And that is the symbol of business, of making money, of merch. And the scripture relates Babel to all the things that they sell in the book of Revelation. In Revelation, we're talking of the great whore of Babylon when it's fallen. It says all of this, but I'm just going to read a couple things. And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise any more. The merchandise of gold and silver and everything else. But you see how it mentions merchandise. And then again, the merchants of these things, which were made rich by her, the great whore of Babel. The sovereign of Babel was the gatherer of gold. And the king of the moment was Nebuchadnezzar. Nebu is the god of merchants. That's why he's Mercury. That's why merchant starts with Merc. And that is why that is the symbol. And just a second. Yeah. So 6 times mentions merchants. That is the symbol. And interestingly enough, they use that same symbol in pharmacies because, like I always mention, they are not selling health or they are not offering health. They are selling a treatment for you to continue buying, and therefore it's just a business. They are merchants, not doctors or actual medicines, right? So, going back, it says how the oppressor has ceased, the gold gatherer ceased. So he connects with merchants as well. Yahweh has broken the staff of the wrong. How interesting. The staff of the merchant is this staff with two serpents. This entity, to be a little bit more clear, like I already mentioned, the one they stole this idea to make this false Elohim is the last. He who comes as Boaz, the pillar, Boaz in the temple, or Boaz in the book of Ruth, like represented by YishaYahu, by Ezekiel, and many others in scriptures, descendant of Joseph. But in the negative, the enemy made a copy, and this is the copy, of course. And when it comes to scriptures, it is Azazel, found in Leviticus 16, and also called Apollyon or Abaddon in Revelation 9, the one who will come out of the bottomless pit in the fifth trumpet. So he holds this scepter that has two serpents pretty much fighting for the wings that they lost. So the wings that they lost, as in the power that Yahweh took from them for their fall, their revelation. I mean their their rebellion. So here we have one serpent that represents the right, and that will be Heilel, and the other one that represents the left, and that will be Samael. And this one is Azazel, the messenger of those false Elohim, those two entities. The messenger, as in also Azazel, who came down in the time of Noah to teach men how to make weapons and how to make cosmetics and a bunch of other things. And he was blamed for all the sin of the world. So, how interesting that he is depicted with a staff. And this staff, you'll know it, like I already mentioned it, because it is the symbol of merchants, which they also use in pharmacy because it is just a business. So here, after saying that you shall take up this proverb against the sovereign of Babel and say, how the oppressor has ceased, the gold gatherer ceased. Yahweh has broken the staff of the wrong, the scepter of the rulers, which is their authority, right? In general, not just talking about that scepter that we just saw. He who struck the people in wrath with ceaseless blows, he who ruled the nations in displeasure, is persecuted and no one restrains. It is talking about the king of Babel who would enter and destroy everything without caring for anybody or anything. And it also bounces to Lucifer, right? To Satan, who was given, in this case, Lucifer, Heilel was given authority to rule, and he took that authority and went over the line by a couple miles. So he was given authority to punish because he was given the position of accuser. And he went over line because angels do not understand mercy. They do not know what mercy is. They barely knew what justice was when Yahweh convicted Samael of rebellion. They knew justice then, but then they have not understood mercy, even though they have seen it in the sacrifice of Mashiach and in the actions of Abraham and others of scriptures. So the enemy went overboard, and that's why it says here, he who struck the people in wrath with ceaseless blows, he who ruled the nations in displeasure is persecuted and no one restrains. All the earth is at rest and at peace. They shall break forth into singing. Remember that the chosen few will be gathered, and then we will sing the song of Moshe and the Lamb, as Revelation 15 says. Even the cypress trees rejoice over you, and the cedars of Lebanon, saying, since you were cut down, no woodcutter has come up against us. Remember that trees represent people. We are to give fruit depending on the fruit that you give, the type of person you are, the type of tree that you are, and what you're good for as well. If it's just for wood to be burned, or if it's good for eating the fruit that it gives, or other things that trees are good for. So even the cypress trees rejoice over you, and the cedars of Lebanon. Lebanon means whiteness. Cedars represent the righteous. So the righteous of purity, pretty much, those who are righteous will rejoice when they see that the accuser has been caught off. Even the cypress trees rejoice over you, and the cedars of Lebanon, saying, so that would be like the many and the few, cypress and cedars. Since you were cut down, no woodcutter has come up against us. Sheol from beneath, where the souls of the dead go. Sheol from beneath, which shows that it is beneath us, not above in heaven. Sheol from beneath is excited about you, to meet you at your coming. So Yahweh was letting, and is still, because he hasn't gone there yet. In a way, this was fulfilled with, no, in a way, no. This was already fulfilled with Nebu, Nabu, Hermes, Mercury, Thoth, same entity, Azazel, because he's in the bottomless pit, and he will come out of it at the end of, well, during the fifth trumpet, chapter 9 of Revelation. So that happened to him already, which in a way, with what we have seen, it seems to be speaking to him because of the merchant, because of the staff, because the sovereign of Babel at the moment had within his name the name Nebu. But like I said, obviously it connects with Lucifer because of his high position. So in a way, my point is that this that we are reading here is like saying that already happened to Azazel, and after Revelation 12, it will begin to happen to Heilel, Lucifer. Same thing, like a prophecy that hits both. And there was something else I wanted to mention from here. Oh yeah, the fact that Azazel was the one who taught how to make weapons of steel and, well, other metals in order to kill. And it's interesting that it says here that the cypress trees rejoice over you and the cedars of Lebanon, saying, since you were cut down, no woodcutter has come up against us. So Sheol from beneath is excited about you to meet you at your coming. It stirs up the dead for you, all the chief ones of the earth. It has raised up from their thrones all the sovereigns of the nations. And well, for a moment, um, I've been thinking about this chapter the whole time without, for some reason, making the connection that this is the one we're reading, because obviously this is the chapter in which Yahweh prophesies the fall of Lucifer. Everybody, most people, I'm not going to say everybody because I don't know everybody in the world, but most people have interpreted this chapter as something that already happened because Yahweh speaks in the past. Not understanding that Yahweh knows everything, so he speaks in the past about something that to us may be in the future. And that is the case here. As I was saying, this already happened to Azazel because he already fell down in the time of Noah and was put in Sheol for human history until this time of the fifth trumpet. But it is from this chapter that we get the name Heilel, that we actually know one at least of the titles that Yahweh uses for this entity known as Lucifer. This is the chapter from which people got the name Lucifer. However, as I was saying, when we read word by word and look at the connections that each word has with an entity or the other, we just saw the many connections with Azazel or Mercury. So it says, all of them respond and say to you, have you also become as weak as we? Have you become like us? This is going to be amazing. When Satan, and like I already said, it happened already to Azazel, goes down to hell, and he's put there for 1,000 years, which is what we see in Revelation. He's going to be like one of them, of all of the dead that are there already. And I always make this analogy that, remember, as I just said not that long ago, that Satan was given a job to see humanity and to accuse humanity with the Torah. So he had a job similar to that of cops, because when somebody would do wrong, he would be sent, or one of his people, or his angels, I should say, would be sent to execute whatever punishment was needed according to the law that was broken. So just like the law in this reality is corrupt, right? And many police officers are not good officers, or are not righteous, are not just. Many of them, I'm not saying that all of them, but many of them, is showing how that, well, that which started in the heavens continued here. And that's why there's a reflection of it in the system, pretty much. So here it says, all of them respond and say to you, have you also become as weak as we? So imagine a corrupt cop who puts a bunch of very evil, bad, powerful criminals in jail, and then he himself is caught and put in jail with all of them. We all know a little bit of how that would go. And it's pretty much like a good movie that could be made because it would be pretty bad how they would treat that cop once he enters jail. And that's what will happen when Satan goes into hell. All of them respond and say to you, have you also become as weak as we? Have you become like us? Your arrogance has been brought down to Sheol. Your arrogance, we know that is one of the main qualities of Satan. And therefore, we should not have or display any arrogance, as actually we were reading yesterday in the Spanish study regarding how in the book of Jeremiah saying that nobody should boast about anything, about if they're wise, if they're strong, or brave, if they are whatever they may think they have or are, they shouldn't boast about it. But only if you're going to boast, you should boast about knowing Yahweh and understanding Him. That is the only thing that we should be boasting about if we are going to do so. Because arrogance is pretty much the main quality that Satan had and made him fall. Basically, the three of them, Samael, Heilel, and Azazel. Your arrogance has been brought down to Sheol. Mainly Heilel, because he was the one that was brought up the most amongst the angels. So your arrogance has been brought down to Sheol, and the sound of your string instruments, showing, as we see in Ezekiel 28, that he was given instruments. He was given the job to make music, to bring worship to Yahweh. So the worship from the people would get to him and he would send it to Yahweh, but then he wanted to keep it. And he was in charge of music, so that's why he uses music in this reality to influence people. The maggot is spread under you, and worms cover you. The maggot is spread under you, and worms cover you. So he mentions two types of worms in verse 11. Rima is one worm, which is related to the one that eats the corpse when when it's buried. And the tolah, that is the one that is related, the word and the insect, in fact, also to Mashiach and the way he died and resurrected, as I have explained in other times. In this case, this word is used to say that the worm won't die in hell, meaning they will be continually consumed eternally. And by saying their worm won't die is because this type of worm, tolah, dies in order to give food to its um its children. So as I was saying, well, thankfully we have like 20 more minutes, as I was told. So I thought I was gonna have to run soon. So okay. As I was saying, tola is a worm that when it dies, they're I'm just lost the word, but the children pretty much eat its body to be able to continue living. So when the worm is about to give birth, it knows that it will be eaten. So it knows that that is it for it. So in the sense of the spiritual revelation that Yahweh gives us in this word and in that insect, is that Yahushua came to die for our sins, like that worm would do so on a tree. And through that death, we would eat of him in our faith, right? Through our faith, in order for us to receive eternal life. So when scripture says that the worm won't die, refers to the fact that they will not have eternal life because they did not have the Messiah to die for them and become their food, their eternal food. So, going back to the verse, it says, so Rima is spread under you and Tola cover you. How you have fallen from the heavens, O Heilel. So here we have the name Heilel that you hear me mention many times. That is verse 12. So you can see it in the Hebrew. How did you fall from heaven, Heilel? This is there's a couple things that are very important to realize. So just remember for now how it says that it fell from heaven, right? So, mi shamaim, from heaven, Heilel, Heilel. Heilel comes from the verb halal. If we take the yud out, which is this one right here, the little one, we have halal, which means to worship, to praise. So he was created to praise Yahweh, but he became arrogant and praised himself. So he turned the meaning of the name and turned it into something wrong. So Yahweh called him Heilel, which makes reference to the job that he had and to his arrogance, to his foolishness. So it says Heilel ben Shachar. Ben is son. Son. Shachar means they translate it normally as morning, and it does happen in the morning, but it's the time of the morning that is still dark. So it's the darkness of the beginning of the morning, right? Because Shihor, which is black or darkness, mainly black, Shihor, as you can see, has as its root Shachar. So it's the darkness of the morning. So this is Heilel, luminary, son of the darkness of the morning. We could also then interpret this as the luminary son of the darkness of the beginning. And who was the first angel of the beginning? It was called Ariel, but then turned into Samael, the first fallen angel. And he is the representation of darkness himself because he is the blind mighty one. He represents spiritual blindness. So we could see this as a couple things. The sun, which is born in the morning when it's dark. And that's why when the sun comes up in the darkness of the morning, it lights up the day. Heilel representing the sun, even though many have connected this for several reasons I don't agree with, mainly with Venus. And there are things that we could say about Venus that connect with Lucifer, yeah, but Venus is mostly a female divinity. Throughout history, most of the time, Diana, the moon and Venus, those two, the moon and Venus, have been mainly female or representing female entities. Therefore, the spirit of evil wisdom, as the moon, and its manifestation on earth as Jezebel, for instance, Venus. So, just a second. All right. So, there are connections, and we could say certain things about how Venus would fit there, but the main luminary that fits this name is the sun. In fact, Heilel actually sounds like Helio, which is sun. Now that I think about it, I just saw it. So, also when the sun brings the morning to each part of the world, angels have to go and sing praises. So they have to do halal, right? Well, and I'm just talking about the verb. Obviously, that's not the conjugation. And therefore, Heilel was in charge of that. So the sun is telling everybody when to worship as it goes around, right? So that was the job of Heilel, Lucifer, in heaven. And he is the son of Samael, which is the darkness of the beginning. So Heilel ben Shachar, luminary, son of the darkness of the beginning of time. And also sun, which is the son of the morning. And it says, you declared, well, it's, just a second. Nick, how interesting here we have, these two letters that you see here form the name God, which is mentioned in Isaiah 65. I already mentioned it. But how interesting to find it right after Heilel ben Shachar. Nun refers to fallen. You see how it says here, how have you fallen? Nafalta starts with a nun, so it represents fall. So Heilel ben Shachar, who fell as God in time. This is time in Hebrew. But anyways, I'll continue because if not, we're not going to finish. Let me go up. I'm just sorry, it was 12, right? How you have fallen from the heavens, O Heilel, son of the morning. You have been cut down to the ground. You have been cut down to the ground. Oh, yeah. That's why that verb, I was first saw it different, but then now it makes sense. The thing I said about how it said God there, if we were to separate the word, we would have the fall of God in time, or the fall of God of time. Here. Nun, God, 8, right? But the verb here would be this, which is to cut. And in this case, he's being cut down to the earth from heaven, right? And you see this is the same root of the name Gidon or Gideon, because he's a cutter. So verse 12, how you have fallen from the heavens, O Heilel, son of the morning, you have been cut down to the ground, to the earth. You who laid low the nations. He is the one who has been working as, they say, the God of the world, right? The mighty one of this world. So he has kept the world the way it is. He has laid low the nations. For you have said in your heart, this is important, listen to this. For you have said in your heart, let me go up to the heavens. What do you mean, let me go up to the heavens? If we just read that he fell from heaven, right? How you have fallen from the heavens. Why? Because he said, let me go up to the heavens. So that shows us, I'm sorry, what's happening here? So that shows us that he was in a heaven, that is the second heaven, and he wanted to go up to the third heaven, which is Yahweh's heaven. So he wanted to be Yahweh. He knew that he couldn't be Yahweh. Well, he should have known that he couldn't be like him either, but that is the closest that he got. He said, I want to be like. And why do I say that? Because his father, Lucifer's father, the darkness of the beginning, Samael, actually said, because he is blind, he said, I am the mighty one. He made the mistake of thinking that he was the mighty one. But then came Heilel and said, I will be like the mighty one, right? And that is like image and likeness. That is the negative of what Yahweh made, because he said, I will make man in my image and likeness. Well, our image and likeness. He said ours because there are two, image and likeness, because he was the Father and the Son, and because the Father would come as first and last. So the first is the image, Yahushua, and the last is the likeness. So now we have that Heilel wanted to be like the Most High. And Samael thought that he was the one. Yahushua is the one, and the last is likeness. So, for you have said in your heart, let me go up to the heavens. So that shows that he was in a lower heaven. Let me raise my throne. So he had a throne above the stars of El, of the mighty one. Now, this is very interesting because you see how it doesn't say of Yahweh, it says of El. So, in a lower reality, here was a fight between Lucifer and Samael. This is the time when Lucifer was taking over everything that Samael had ruled over before. Pretty much Moloch over Kium, Jupiter over Saturn. And as they would say, Baal was taking over here in their religions back in the day, their mythologies and all of that, which were based on a reality from the heavens. This is the time when there was a change of administration, basically set up by Yahweh, but it manifested through war and angels going against each other. So, for you have said in your heart, let me go up to the heavens and let me raise my throne above the stars of El, and let me sit in the mount of the appointment on the sides of the north. Where it says, let me sit on the mount of the appointment, that's verse 13. It says, Har Moed, right here, Be Har Moed, the mount of the Moed, of the appointment. That is Mount Sion. Some believe that in Revelation, where it is written, when normally we read Harmegiddo, Harmegidon, or Harmageddon, depending on how you pronounce it, should have been Har Moed instead. They believe that there was a mistake that somebody made, and when it was originally Hebrew and they translated it to Greek, instead of putting the equivalent of the Ayin in Greek, they added a letter in Greek that looks similar to the Ayin, that has a different sound in Gamma, which made it the G of Gidon. If that was the case, as some believe, this is what it would say, Behar Moed. And remember that Ed is witness. So it's the mountain of testimony. So going back. For you have said in your heart, let me go up to the heavens. Let me raise my throne above the stars of El. And let me sit in the mount of appointment of the sides of the north. On the sides of the north. The north is the left. Remember that in the beginning of time, Yahweh gave the right to Heilel, as I have explained from several books that are not found in scriptures. They took them out or they didn't put them in. And El, which obviously means mighty one and mainly refers to the Most High Yahweh, within the angels, it was connected to Samael. So he was at the left. He was in the north. So interestingly enough, we see Heilel saying that he wants to take over the north as well. And we know that evil comes from the north, as it is written in the book of YishaYahu. Verse 14 says, let me go up above the heights of the clouds. Let me be like the Most High. So, like, he knew that he couldn't be the Most High, but he wanted to be like, and that was his sin. And like I always also say, remember that Samael and Heilel represent the main weaknesses of males and females, respectively. Samael mainly those of males, and Heilel represents the weaknesses that are found mostly in females. And when it comes to Azazel, the third Satan, those weaknesses are the ones that are found in children, like rebellion and etc. So let me go up above the heights of the clouds. Let me be like the Most High. So here we have the Most High. There is no doubt who that is. That is Yahweh. Even though in lower realities, if they don't know Yahweh, to them the Most High would be whoever is at the highest point of what they know. And that is pretty much how it happens in this reality as well. When people do not know who they worship, they are just told who to worship. They don't research it, they don't test it, spiritually speaking, and they end up worshiping another entity as the Most High, even though it may be quite low. So let me go up above the heights of the clouds. Let me be like the Most High. But you are brought down to Sheol, to the sides of the pit. Those who see you stare at you and ponder over you, saying, is this the man who made the earth tremble, who shook the reins? So you see how it says the man? So there are reasons why, like this is one of the reasons why some people say, no, he's not talking about no Satan, no angel, because he says the man. All right, so there are a couple of things that could be said there. Let me just look what word is said there in Hebrew 16. Ha'ish. Ha'ish. Now, Ish is a term that was used by Adam referring to himself as a man ready to be married. But Ish is also a term to refer to a certain type of angels. There are several type of angels, and there's one category called the Ishim, which is the plural of Ish. What does it mean? It means that there are type of angels that look like human beings. Those are the Ishim. And according to a part of Judaism, those are the ones that can incarnate as humans. So by calling him an Ish, could be referring to the fact that he's part of that category that can look like a human. But we know that, well, some may say, but Ezekiel calls him a cherub or a cherub, right? A cherubim. And as we look at that chapter close, like in a closer way, we see that it is more possible that Yahweh was not calling Lucifer or Heilel, Satan, a cherub, but saying that he was with the cherub, the cherubim, because remember that they are four, the ones that cover the throne. And if he was one of them, he would have four faces and other things that are not mentioned regarding him, because he is called a serpent, right? And there are certain angels that are called serpents, which are the seraphim. So there are other reasons why he could be called a serpent, because of how he fell and his actions and all of that, while originally he could have been an Ishim. But anyways, scripture calls him a serpent. He was with the cherubim, Ezekiel 28, and here he's called an Ish. There are two ways of seeing this. First, remember that Yahweh is not only talking to Satan, he is talking to Satan through the king, the king of Babel, meaning a human. So that human is in fact a man. And when he went to hell, people were saying, oh, that is the man that would make everybody afraid. But not only that, when Satan falls to the earth, he will be given a body, a human body, that is Yahweh's temple. That's why it says that when you see the abomination of desolation, the place where you should not be, let him who read understand, meaning when Satan enters a human body, then that is the Antichrist, the false Messiah. So once he gets that body, with that body, he's going to go into hell. So he's going to go as a man. with no power. So all of them respond and say to you, have you also become as weak as we? Have you become like us? Your arrogance has been brought down to Sheol, and the sound of your string instruments. The maggot is spread under you, and worms cover you. All that we already read. Let me go above the heights of the clouds. Let me be like the Most High. But you are brought down to Sheol, to the sides of the pit. Those who see you stare at you and ponder over you, saying, is this the Ish? Is this the man who made the earth tremble, who shook rains, who made the world as a wilderness and destroyed cities, who would not open the house of his prisoners, right? Like in the king of Babel, but spiritually speaking, the accuser who destroyed every nation throughout history, who would punish and kill and destroy and make war and everything else throughout history. And then in the end times, we'll get a body and become the abomination of desolation. So we'll destroy every single thing in the world. Who made the world as a wilderness and destroyed its cities, who would not open the house of his prisoners, for he is in charge of Sheol, hell, jail, so he would not let people come out. All the sovereigns of the nations, all of them, were laid in steam, everyone in his own house. But you have been thrown from your burial site like an abominable branch, like the garment of those who are killed. You see how he calls him a branch? Remember that the last is the branch of David, just like Yahushua is the root. So in the negative, Samael is the root and the branch is Heilel. Like an abominable branch, like the garment of those who are killed, thrust through with a sword, who go down to the stones of the pit like a trampled corpse. You are not joined with them in the burial place, for you have destroyed your land and killed your people. This is huge because obviously, if we're talking about the king of Babel, so we know that he's talking about the land of Babel. But when we realize that he's talking about Heilel, Lucifer, it says you are joined with them in the burial place, for you have destroyed your land, not their land, your land. Now, there are two ways of seeing it. Lucifer is the mighty one of this world, so he destroyed the world that Yahweh allowed him to administer, right? So Yahweh will have to make a new earth and a new heavens, as he said. But in another way of seeing it, still correct, another interpretation, we see how Heilel, as his representative, was in charge of the land of Israel. So just like there will be a new Jerusalem is because there's an old Jerusalem. And the old Jerusalem is just a representation of the true Jerusalem. Therefore, everything regarding the Israel and the land of human history has been just a representation that was in charge of Heilel. That's why it has been destroyed over and over again. And that's why Yahweh himself says to this angel, Heilel, you have destroyed your land and killed your people, because he was connected to the flesh. Yahweh came for a people of spirit. That's why Yahushua is the last Adam, a spirit that gives life. However, Adam was a living soul, different than a spirit that gives life. So, you are not joined with them in the buried place, for you have destroyed your land and killed your people. Yahweh came through Yahushua to make his people, the new people, the true Israelites. And I always, I already mentioned earlier how the same Israel of the past is the one that he's choosing. Yeah, but the true Israelites of the past, which are those who are truly believers and circumcised in their hearts and ears. So it says, and killed your people, the ones that worship him. Let the seed of evildoers never be mentioned. And interestingly enough, that's why the Jews who rejected Mashiach and called him Yeshu, meaning let the name be, well, the name and his memory be not mentioned or destroyed. It's even worse than this, but And he says, prepare his children for slaughter. And remember that his children would, like, if the children of Yahweh are those who believe in the Messiah, Yahushua, the children of Heilel, Zeus, God, would be those who believe in the false Messiah, which would be Azazel. Prepare his children for slaughter because of the crookedness of their fathers, lest they rise up and possess the land and fill the face of the world with cities. Remember that the first person who made a city was Cain. So cities are connected to evildoers. Normally, is very busy and everybody's thinking about making money. And you know how the love of money is the root of all evil. So cities are all about making money and therefore tends to be roots of a lot of evil. And I repeat, Cain was the one who made the first city. And then remember that Judas, right? Yehuda Ishkiriot, Judas was Ish, a man. How interesting that Yahweh just called Heilel Ish, right? Judas Ishkiriot it means man of the cities. And now we read here, lest they rise up and possess the land and fill the face of the world with cities. And this also, prepare his children for slaughter because of the crookedness of their fathers. How interesting that it says his children as in one father, but then it says their fathers as in his children spiritually and their fathers genetically. And also, well, even spiritually in the sense of their pastors, their preachers, their priests, those who taught them crookedness, they will be punished as well. And I shall rise up against them, declares Yahweh of hosts, and shall cut off from Babel the name, listen to this, and shall cut off from Babel, which means from confusion, which is the confusion that has a hold of the whole world when it comes to the spiritual, when it comes to the names people worship, invoke when they pray, and all of that. So listen to what Yahweh is saying. And I repeat, Babel means confusion, and Yahweh refers to the false religion that claims to believe in the Messiah in the world. The biggest false religion that claims to believe in the Messiah in the world, he calls it the great whore of Babylon, of Babel. So now Yahweh is saying, and shall cut off from Babel, from confusion, the name and remnant and offspring and descendant. Everything starting with the name. And what does scripture say regarding the great whore of Babel? In Revelation 17, it says, and the woman was dressed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, holding in her hand a gold cup filled with abominations and the filthiness of her whoring. And upon her forehead a name written, a secret, a mystery, a sod. Babel, meaning confusion. The great confusion. The mother, so a church, of the whores, spirits, and of the abominations, idols, of the earth. And remember that scripture says that on her head there are names of blasphemy in this next one. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet colored beast, same great whore, full of names of blasphemy. Those are the names that people worship, that people generally worship in the world, thinking that they are worshiping the Almighty, thinking that it is fine, thinking that it doesn't matter how you call him. However, scripture itself says that the great whore does it through many names of blasphemy. So going back to Isaiah, And I shall raise up against them, declares Yahweh of hosts, and shall cut off from Babel the name and remnant. Now, let me see how it says it in Hebrew real quick. 22. Just because of the way Jews tend to say it and teach. It says, and I will cut from Babel name, shame, the shame and the remnant. So, the name that they praise, and obviously it's also referring to the name of their family. They will not be remembered, just like they don't want people to remember or know the name of the Most High and that of the Son. Yahweh gives them the same punishment. So pretty much he's saying, you don't want people to know my name, then I will make sure people don't know your name eternally. And shall cut off from Babel the name and remnant and offspring and descendant, declares Yahweh. And I shall make it a possession for the porcupine. So now he's referring to animals that represent impurity, that represent evil spirits, demons, and fallen angels, depending on the animal, what it represents. And I shall make it a possession for the porcupine in marshes and muddy water, and shall sweep it with the broom of destruction, declares Yahweh of hosts. Yahweh of hosts has sworn, saying, truly, as I have planned, so shall it be. Truly, as I have planned, so shall it be. And as I have purposed, so it stands. To break Ashur in my land. Remember that Ashur represents the government of the end times, the New World Order. When it is mentioned, like in this case, it represents the system. To break Ashur in my land and tread him down on my mountains. And his yoke, and when we see him as a leader, it will be the world leader, the beast of Revelation, or the little horn of the book of Daniel. And his yoke shall be removed from them. And his yoke shall be removed from them, and his burden removed from their shoulders. This is the counsel that is counseled for all the earth. And this is the hand that is stretched out over all the nations. The hand. Remember that Yahushua is the arm, the last is the hand. So Yahweh is sending the hand to counsel. Remember what Isaiah 9 says, referring the coming of the last, who will be called Marvelous Counselor. And he is Menachem, the spirit of counsel, once again entering a body. And also, just in case, this can be interpreted as what Yahweh counseled for the earth, of course, right? Regarding Ashur. This is the counsel that is counseled for all the earth, and this is the hand that is stretched out over all the nations. For Yahweh of hosts has counseled, and who annuls it. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm going to read it again because it was a question. For Yahweh of hosts has counseled, and who annuls it? And his hand that is stretched out, who turns it back? Right? So if Yahweh counseled, meaning if he said that is what should happen, it will happen. And if that's the case, there is no one who can annul it. And his hand that is stretched out, nobody can turn it back. So confirms what I was saying regarding his hand coming as the counselor. And we could even separate it in first and last. Yahushua, what Yahushua did, no one can stop it. No one can make it null. And what the last is coming to do, no one can turn it back. Because Yahushua started it. This is the message which came in the year that sovereign Ahaz died. Do not rejoice. Listen to this. Confirming the fact that there are three Satans. Something that most people don't know And sometimes it's hard for them to understand when they come to our ministry. Many times they ask that. So it says, "Do not rejoice, all of you Philistia, that the rod that struck you is broken. For out of the serpent's roots comes out forth an adder, and its offspring is a fiery flying serpent." So pretty much Yahweh is saying, don't worry. I mean, don't get too excited about the one that was hurting you being killed, because after him comes another one, and then another one, which is kind of like the different exiles that the people of Israel had to go through, or other nations, what they have to go through, like the Philistine, right? But listen to this, like it says, "Do not rejoice, all of you of Philistia," which means a strange or foreign place. So the people of Israel were sent all over the world as foreigners or to foreign places, which fits the meaning of this word. And then he says that the rod that struck you is broken. So, like saying, do not rejoice yet just because Yahushua came and killed death, because there's still certain other things that need to be destroyed. That's why there had to be 2,000 more years after Mashiach came. Remember earlier, I mentioned how Samael was the root and Heilel was the branch, because it mentioned Heilel and then it called it an abominable branch. So I connected the contrast between Yahushua, the life, and Samael, death. Both are the roots of life and death. And the last and Heilel as the branch. So now it says, "For out of the serpent's roots," that represents Samael, the first fallen angel, "comes forth an adder," that represents Heilel, and its offspring is a fiery flying serpent, that is Azazel, the one who will eventually manifest in the sky, in the clouds, like Christians are expecting Jesus, flying as the Christ, and they will accept him as such. So the fiery flying serpent, that is, I repeat, Azazel, which once again that connects with this staff, because he is a serpent, the third serpent. These two are the previous ones. So this will be the serpent, and he's holding a staff with wings, and he has wings on his feet, and he has wings on his head, on his helmet. How interesting, because therefore he has 6 wings, like the seraphim. 2 wings on his head, 2 wings on his staff, 2 wings on his feet, 6 wings like the angels, like a fiery flying serpent. Because if it's fiery, then it is a seraph, like the seraphim with 6 wings. How interesting, because I just saw that. Let me go to, we're in Isaiah 14. Let me see this verse real quick to see the 3 types of serpents or words that the verse uses. Here it is. Serpent. Then it says fiery flying serpent. I want to see those 3 words. So the first one is Nahash, which is the regular serpent, snake. Nahash. Same numerical value as Mashiach, interestingly enough. And like I said, Samael, which is the root, is the contrast, the negative contrast of Yahushua, the life, HaMashiach, 358. So the root of the Nahash will come out, Tsefa, and its fruit. So you see how it says its fruit. So the Tsefa is the branch, because it's giving fruit. So the Tsefa is the abominable branch, Heilel, mentioned in this chapter. And Yahweh is telling us that after him comes another, which is a saraf, confirming what I just mentioned. It is referring to Azazel. It is referring to Mercury, who has 6 wings. A saraf, meofef. Now, I'm going to look at those 2 words, sefa and meofef. Of, referring to the fact that it flies. Saraf, the fact that it burns. And Sofeh, I already had it here. So Nahash, that connects with and confirms that it refers to Samael. Tsefa, interestingly enough, starts with the Sadi. Remember that he is the angel that appears as an angel of light. He claims to be righteous. He has spoken against the people, as he is the mouth of the accuser, as in this letter is a mouth. And he is the all-seeing eye, as in the ayin is an eye. So the all-seeing eye who speaks against the righteous. How interesting if we see letter by letter from left to right. The all-seeing eye that speaks against the righteous. The one who claims to be righteous and accuses those who he sees is a poisonous serpent, a viper. Poisonous like the ones that were biting the people of Israel when they were speaking words against Moshe. And reason why Yahweh had to give them through Moshe a serpent, a brass serpent. So that is this. And look how it says here. Seifa, from an unused root meaning to extrude, a viper, thrusting out the tongue. Like Heilel, who used its tongue to deceive Chava in order for her to eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge. And then we have off, which uf in this case, which is to fly. I already mentioned that. And saraf, which is to burn. The serpent, the fiery serpent, seraphim. And you see these ones appear in Isaiah, which is the one I was looking here when I went to Isaiah 6. And you see it says, each one had 6 wings. Above it stood the seraphim. Each one had 6 wings. With twain he covered his face, so those 2 on the helmet, on the head of Mercury. And with twain he covered his feet, like the wings on his shoes. And with twain he did fly, like the one on his staff. How amazing and interesting that shows that Mercury is originally a saraf, one of the seraphim. Is therefore the flying fiery serpent, the third mentioned in Isaiah. My point is that I have been preaching that for a long time, but with this is confirmed like a lot. So do not rejoice, all of you Philistia, that the rod that struck you is broken, for out of the serpent's roots comes forth an adder, and its offspring is a fiery flying serpent. Remember that the Incas or the Mayas or the Aztecs, depending on where you were, they would worship a flying serpent called Kukulkan or Quetzalcoatl. Here it is, Quetzalcoatl for the Aztecs, Quiche for the Mayans. Oh no, I'm sorry, I'm on the Quiche Mayans. It was Gugumats. Quetzalcoatl, the Aztecs, Kukulkan, well, in general Mayan mythology. So it is the feather serpent, referring to a serpent that is also a bird that can fly. So this entity that Yahweh is talking about here in Isaiah also appeared back in the day here in America, to all those who were here previously, who very likely were descendants of Israel, as we have spoken before regarding that subject. So you see how Isaiah speaks about the fact that the people would be under the flying serpent, sadly, after having been under the adder, the viper. And that's what happened. Because the first 2,000 years, the world was under the serpent's root. So that ruled. Then the world was under the rule of the adder, the viper. And that was the law and the prophets. And when Mashiach came as the truth and they rejected him, the apostasy began. And the world has been under the rule of the fiery flying serpent. 2,000 years, 2,000 years, 2,000. And the firstborn of the poor shall feed, and the needy lie down in safety. And I shall kill your roots. I shall kill your roots with scarcity of food. Third seal of Revelation. And he shall kill your remnant. Howl, O gate. Cry, O city. Melt away, all you of Philistia. For smoke shall come for smoke shall come from the north, and there is no stranger in his ranks. Howl, O gate, cry, O city, melt away, all you of Philistia, for smoke shall come from the north. How interesting that nowadays many people call Israel Palestine or Palestine, which is Philistia. And the north is helping with bringing some smoke. For smoke shall come from the north, and there is no stranger in his ranks. And what does one answer the messengers of a nation? That Yahweh has founded Zion, and the poor of his people take refuge in it. When the chosen few are taken to the prepared place, and we'll sing a song over Zion in Revelation 14. That's how the chapter ends.